Tonight, I want to talk to you all about real estate contracts. Right now, Nashville, Tennessee is one of the hottest real estate markets in the country. The population here continues to grow at an average of 100 persons per day. Real estate home prices have increased approximately 9% over the past year. In the last month alone, nearly 3,900 residential properties sold, and that was a 3.8% increase compared to August 2016. I know personally, as I recently sold and purchased another home here within the past 12 months, so things are moving very quickly in this area. With such a hot market for homes and rentals coupled with low interest rates, many buyers and sellers are taking advantage of the market. However, it is important and imperative that for such transactions, each party has the proper representation and contract in place. There is a particular scenario that I wanted to discuss here. It involves a first-time home buyer who contracted to purchase a single-family home from a seller, and just some issues that arose with their contract. So the facts of the case are as follows. Tamara Holloway entered into a contract with Justin McCrory to purchase a single-family home. Ms. Holloway was represented by an agent while Mr. McCrory listed the property for sale by owner and failed to have agent representation. During the closing process, the parties agreed that Ms. Holloway would pay for a rush appraisal in an effort to meet a June 1st closing deadline requested by Mr. McCrory. At the closing, which occurred on June 1st, Ms. Holloway did not collect the keys from Mr. McCrory, and Mr. McCrory refused to vacate the premises. Per Mr. McCrory, he needed until the 15th of the month to move, despite requesting the June 1st close date. Typically, what happens in situations like those, if the seller needs additional time before they're able to move from the premises, they will reach out to their agent, who will then reach out to the buyer's agent, and they'll work out terms of an agreement if it's feasible for the seller to stay. And these terms and any remedies will be added into the contract as an amendment. And again, it's something that they put in writing to protect all parties. But in this particular scenario, there was no amendment to the contract. Therefore, the discussion or the option for Mr. McCrory to stay until the 15th was not agreed upon by both parties. Despite the closing, Mr. McCrory locked himself in the property for an additional 2 weeks, along with 3 guard dogs, and would not allow anyone on the property. Mr. McCrory even tried to get physical, as Ms. Holloway made several attempts to have the police intervene and have him removed from the property. Eventually, Ms. Holloway had to file a detainer warrant, which is the first step in the eviction process, and an eviction typically takes about 30 days. She filed a detainer warrant 2 weeks after the closing in an effort to have him removed from the property. After that was filed, and after a lot of media attention, Mr. McCrory decided to vacate the premises, but it did take about 2 weeks after the date of closing. So with this particular scenario, there were several questions that I had. Unfortunately, fortunately, the case was solved without going to court, so I will not have specific answers to these questions, but these are just some things that kind of came to mind as I reviewed the scenario. First thing that came to mind was Mr. McCrory in breach of contract by not vacating the premises? With this contract, there was an absolute promise that Ms. Holloway agreed to pay Mr. McCrory a specified amount for the property he was selling, contingent upon receiving a satisfactory inspection, an appraisal, and the ability to secure financing, all of which Ms. Holloway did. In return, Mr. McCrory agreed to transfer ownership of the property to Ms. Holloway. But by not transferring the keys or vacating the premises on a specified date, could this constitute breach of contract? Transferring the keys, is that considered a condition subsequent to the contract? Another question in this situation were the terms of the agreement. Were the terms expressly stated, or was it just simply implied? Did the contract expressly state that Mr. McCrory had to vacate the premises on the specified date, or just simply that Ms. Holloway would take ownership of the property, and it was just simply implied that he would know to be out on that date? Could Ms. Holloway at this point rescind contract since he was interfering with her taking full possession and ownership of the property after she met the conditions of the contract? So those were just a couple questions that I had. Also, was she owed any damages for the days that Mr. McCrory stayed on the property or for fees that she incurred in an effort to get him to vacate? These are all things that I think had this case gone to court, we would have had some answers for. But thankfully for Ms. Holloway, the situation was able to be resolved without having to go to court and take additional measures. It just took a little longer than what she thought to be able to take possession of her first home. So those are just some things that occurred with a real estate transaction that happened here, and I would love to hear your thoughts about that situation. Thanks.